NCTV45, The Train, anytime on your time. The Cedars is a great restaurant with outstanding Mediterranean food. The Cedars takeout menu is second to none, featuring pizza, stromboli, hoagies, their famous lamb on the rod, and so much more. So when you're hungry and you want that Newcastle taste, make it Cedars. Now with 2 locations in Newcastle, 827 Addis Street on the east side and 1101 Highland Avenue. Call Cedars East 724-658-9260 or Cedars North 724-652-7657.
The Beanery Depot and Deli. Coffee, made-to-order subs, snacks, and more. Meatball sandwiches, fresh and hot. Pepperoni rolls, fish sandwiches, chicken, milkshakes. The Beanery Deli. When you're hungry for something special, and it won't cost you a lot of beans.
Welcome everybody to the Cedars Sports Corner. I'm Alex DeLaverson, and with me is Greg, the mad scientist, Bashero. We are the 3SN Fantasy Toolkit. James Dotson has the evening off, so that's why Greg is here. And we're going to pick off a little bit where we left off last time. We are going to discuss wide receivers and tight ends for this upcoming 2016 fantasy football season. But first things first. Greg, how are you?
I am absolutely fantastic. Thrilled to be here. I want to thank 2 class acts here. First of all, the Cedars Lounge for sponsoring this Cedars Sports Corner here. They're fantastic food, great place, and of course, the person who basically is running NCTV, Mr. Angelo Parada, fantastic person. Thank you very much for having us here. So, we're going to talk a little bit about wide receivers, tight ends, and
sleepers, maybe players who to avoid.
Talk about sleepers. I might fall asleep here.
I know.
It's been a long day. So, go ahead.
Well, I guess first thing I want to start out with is that, especially when it comes to Rob Gronkowski, he's kind of that hybrid wide receiver tight end type. He's usually taken, the last part of the first round in most drafts.
Most drafts, that's the case, yeah.
But I was wondering, do you foresee any, maybe, I don't want to say problems this year, or maybe a little bit of issues with the Brady suspension, and now they have Martellus Bennett coming in?
Well, you see, here's the thing with Gronk. Gronk is injury prone. He's got a bad back. He's always had a bad back, but his play eclipses everything else that happens on the field. Yeah, Brady's got the 4-game suspension. That may be a little bit of a problem. Yes, Martellus Bennett is going to eat into a little bit of Gronk time, so to speak. But it's also going to help Gronkowski, I think, stay healthy as well, because Martellus Bennett, I believe, is a tremendous sleeper pickup.
I agree.
This is a pass-happy offense. Tom Brady is definitely going to have something to prove. If you thought Tom Brady was good last year, because he was all honked off and all upset about this whole thing, he now has something to really prove. So watch out. But yeah.
Oh, I agree. And I think the way that the Patriots use their tight ends, they always seem to come out with, 2 tight ends. And remember the last time they had another notable tight end in there, Aaron Hernandez. He did pretty well. I think he...
I think he's in prison now, though.
Well, he is in prison now.
He did so well.
You do want to avoid him in your draft.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, his last 16 games in a Patriots uniform, he caught 90 passes for 974 yards and 9 touchdowns. So that's very indicative of how the Patriots plan, I would say, to use Martellus Bennett, especially like I just said, the way they use 2 tight ends.
Let's talk about numbers here with Martellus Bennett. Last year in 2015, he had 53 receptions for 439 yards and 3 touchdowns. That, to me, he was in an offense that wasn't as friendly toward what his talents are. So
right.
With all this being said, And the other thing, too, is remember this, and this is why tight ends are so very, very important in fantasy football, especially when you have young quarterbacks. Who is the escape valve for a young quarterback? The tight end. Because the tight end is that guy that I believe it's called the underneath game, where he's like a running back. He's like a possession type of receiver where, he's going to go, 5 or 6, 10 yards, grab that ball, but he's going to go into the underneath. He's not stretching the field so much as he's basically utilizing the field that's not been stretched out, and then he's going to act like the running back by basically knocking off chunks of yards. So with that stated, Martellus Bennett in a New England system is going to flourish, like Aaron Hernandez did when he was legal, of course.
Right, of course.
But in this particular case, with a second-string quarterback taking over for 4 games with Tom Brady being on suspension, look for Gronk's numbers to be high and also Martellus Bennett's numbers to be very high as well. So this guy is a sleeper, definite value pickup. And right now, I did a little bit of research. Mad scientist, always researchers here, by the way. 71.4% owned. That means about 29% of the leagues that are out there, he hasn't been picked up yet. If you don't have him, get him.
I agree, and I actually picked him up in the draft we did the other day. And I think the question becomes, when it comes to players like Gronkowski and Bennett, what is their value? How early is too early to take a Rob Gronkowski?
Well, Gronkowski is a superstar. Okay, so when you have somebody like a Gronkowski, end of the first round, beginning of the second round, definitely is a second round type guy to pick up, no doubt about that. So, but as far as picking up some of the more mortal tight ends that are out there, somebody who's not so much on a Gronkowski level or a Jimmy Graham level. When Jimmy Graham was with the Saints, he was kind of up in that same level too. You want to take a look at a tight end, probably a very good tight end, 3rd or 4th round.
Mm-hmm. And you actually just mentioned someone I do want to talk about, Jimmy Graham. I noticed that he's actually being taken, I think, in a lot of leagues quite early, I would say. I think most top-tier websites or organizations have him drafted between rounds 10 and 12, and I don't get it. I mean, he's going to be coming off an ACL tear. He's obviously not the main receiving option at the goal line anymore, and he only had 2 touchdowns last year.
2 touchdowns. He had 48 receptions for 605 yards. He's been picked up in 81% of the leagues. He's got Russell Wilson as his quarterback. Last year was his bust year. This year, he's not going to be a breakout year for him. He's going to keep similar numbers. I don't see anything really going strongly for Jimmy Graham right now, because that is such an offense that has so many weapons, and I just don't see that. I don't see him putting up the same type of numbers that he did when he had Drew Brees as his quarterback.
Speaking of Drew Brees, Coby Fleener now is going to make another great target for him.
Coby Fleener will be a fantastic target.
Sleeper.
So, definite sleeper.
So now that we've covered our tight ends, we're going to be coming back in our next segment. We're going to be discussing wide receivers. You don't want to miss this.
Come to Big Polly's Sports Bar in Newcastle.
The place is spacious with all the seating you'll need, with 2 bars and a huge menu that features wings, pizza, sandwiches, burgers, pasta, and fries.
Big Polly's
is just right to watch the game. You'll love the sports memorabilia throughout the bar. There's plenty of parking too.
Big Polly's Sports Bar
in Newcastle at 207 East Long Avenue. Call 724-658-8800. That's 658-8800. Gentlemen, if you want to look your best with high-quality clothing, then I recommend Main Street Clothiers and Custom Tailors in downtown Newcastle. Mike Caggiano is the owner, and he and his staff have been in the business for decades, and they will always give you the right recommendations. They also carry Rondinelli tuxedos. That's Main Street Clothiers and Custom Tailors, 210 East Washington Street, downtown Newcastle. Call 724-652-3851.
Welcome back to the Cedars Sports Corner. In this segment, we are going to be talking wide receivers for this upcoming NFL fantasy football season. And this is the position, I think, that is the most, I would say, confluttered this year in terms of talent. There's a lot of talent, and I think there's a lot of sleepers, and I think there's also a few players to avoid. So, Greg, what stands out to you in this class? Any players, anything you want to add?
Well, let's put something into perspective. Last week, our esteemed value man, Mr. Dotson, stated that there are over 15 quarterbacks in the NFL that are poised to throw over 4,000 yards. With that stated, it's a throwing game now. And with that stated, the wide receiver position is the value position to go after right now. Whereas in times past when I, the old mad scientist, started doing drafting in the NFL, fantasy football leagues, the running back position was, the desired position. Not anymore. It's a wide receiver game right now. And with that stated, there are some definite people that you want to go after in the wide receiver realm to basically make your team value, chock full of value. Let's just put it that way. So, you're asking me what now, after my long diatribe here?
Well, I was going to ask you, is there any, other than anything standing out, I was going to ask you any players you had in mind, any sleepers. I actually had one of Kamar Aiken out of Baltimore. Mm-hmm. Here's my thing. When when Aiken was called upon last year to be the guy, he averaged 6 catches and 77 yards and 4 touchdowns in 10 games last year. Mm-hmm. So the dude can play. Mm-hmm. And that was also with 4 different quarterbacks starting the last 2 games. Mm-hmm. And, Flacco's going to be healthy this year. Steve Smith is aging. Some people are going to say, they have Brashard Perryman, Smith, they have more wide receivers there. I don't think so. I think Aiken has the number 1 spot, in my opinion.
I would agree with you on that. I'll tell you a couple other sleepers that I'm looking at right now. People that may have been shied away from, Josh Gordon in Cleveland. Yeah, he had a year off, but if you watch preseason football, and I know some of us do, Josh Gordon really did well, and he seems to have developed a chemistry with RG3 up in Cleveland. Cleveland needs offense. If Josh Gordon can stay off the happy weed, Josh Gordon will be, I believe, a major, major sleeper pickup. Don't be afraid to go after him because he will be available in your later rounds because people are staying away from him like a
I guess when it comes to him, I'm worried because he hasn't played a game since December of 2014. And, of course, all his off-field issues and, he's going to be learning an entirely new playbook. It's just not a lot of baggage.
But he is incredibly adaptive. Mm-hmm. And he showed that in the preseason game that I watched. I think he will be tremendous. And another guy in Cleveland will be tremendous is their tight end, Gary Barnidge. I know we're going back to the last segment about tight ends, but Gary Barnidge is also going to be a key player. A value player, a value wide receiver, getting back to the wide receiver, somebody who is a definite sleeper right now is Jermaine Kearse.
So tell me, why do you think he's a sleeper? He hasn't really been on anyone's radar as far as I know.
49 receptions last year for 685 yards and 5 touchdowns. He has Russell Wilson as his quarterback. This guy is a tremendous target. He's going to be running opposite. He's basically paired up with Tyler Lockett up there in Seattle as well.
Right.
Everybody's going after Tyler Lockett. Jermaine Kearse is a guy that, and he's had previous successes where he's always been. So I look at Kearse as being a tremendous sleeper and somebody that can have, I think, a decent breakout season.
Yeah, and other than Doug Baldwin coming on strong towards the end of last year, I wouldn't say there's too many other players that would give Kearse a hard time in terms of limiting his fantasy production. So, Jimmy Graham, Tyler Lockett, Doug Baldwin, those aren't really guys that are going to be reliable, I would say, starters for you and your fantasy team.
And let's take a look at the receivers in Jacksonville right now, too. Allen Robinson, definitely. I mean, he's amazing. He is the real deal. But if you don't have the opportunity to get Robinson, take a look at Alan Harns out of Jacksonville. 64 receiving yards for 1,031 yards and 10 touchdowns last year. Blake Bortles is the real deal down there. He is spreading the ball around. Get your Jacksonville tight ends, get your Jacksonville wide receivers. They will make you money.
And I think people have to understand, too, is a lot of times players are often overvalued when they're on teams that win a lot. So when you're on a Jacksonville Jaguars type of team where you're going to be playing from behind, typically, I mean, they're just not an all-around good squad, you're going to be racking up
garbage points.
Yeah,
garbage
you are,
points.
especially in PPR leagues.
Right. And that's what makes it. That's what makes it all worthwhile. Another really good one, because I see that we have 2 minutes left.
2-minute warning.
2-minute warning time. Sammy Watkins. Sammy Watkins out of Buffalo. Tyrod Taylor is going on a tear. Sammy Watkins is the man in Buffalo. If you don't have him and he's available, get him.
Yeah, Watkins, I think, is actually a great pick. And they are in an offense, I think, that has pretty good weapons. You got Taylor, McCoy, and Watkins. In that type of offense, they're going to be, I feel, spreading the ball around a lot. They're going to be stretching the field a lot. And Watkins sometimes gets a little bit of a red flag because of his injury last year. But when he was on the field, he was playing great.
Yeah, and he's going to have a tremendous season as well. So
Absolutely. So all in all, when it comes to wide receivers, you said earlier that this is a wide receivers game.
definitely.
I think I agree with you, and I think this all started with the rule changes in 2010, the whole James Harrison headshot thing, and I definitely am trying to get my cream of the crop wide receivers in the first 2 rounds.
And we'll talk more about these draft strategies coming up in the next segment.
The Branding Iron Bar and Grill, a great place to gather.
Some examples from the menu: 45-cent jumbo wings with 30 different kinds of sauce, meatball sub and fries, $5.50, hot cheese balls and burgers, and delicious large sandwiches. Stop in during happy hour, 4:30 to 7:30. You can dine in or take out. The Branding Iron Bar and Grill is located at 2221 Ben Franklin Highway, Edinburgh. Call 724-658-1210.
Welcome back to the Cedars Sports Corner. In this segment, we are going to be talking about draft strategies and how to run the waiver wire. So let's start out with drafting. Greg, when it comes to picking your fantasy football team, what is your normal strategy? What do you usually do?
Well, you see, here's the thing. I didn't get the moniker Mad Scientist for nothing. And to me, the draft is just an entry into the league itself.
Right.
Yes, it's not the only chance to make your team a great team, but on the same token, you do want to get yourself the strongest players as possible. Right now, with the way that the drafts are going right now, and the way the NFL is going right now, the quarterback position is a strong position, but the position that's going to get you the most number of points is going to be the wide receiver. So draft heavily in rounds 1 through 4, 1 through 5, wide receivers, and running backs that are pass-catching running backs. Those are people that are going to get you those combined yards that can make you the points. Do you need to get a quarterback in the first round? Back in the old days, you got to get a quarterback. You got to get Peyton Manning in the first round. You got to get Joe Montana in the first round.
Yeah.
No, not so much anymore. As Dotson stated, that there's 14 quarterbacks in the NFL right now that are poised to throw over 4,000 yards. We don't need a quarterback right away. Cool your jets. The earliest that you should be picking a quarterback is maybe the 8th round. 8th, 9th, 10th round. There are plenty of quarterbacks to go around. And if you get somebody like an Eli Manning, he's serviceable, he'll get you points because you need the wide receivers to make this thing happen. There are only a handful of wide receivers out there that are decent. Go after those first. Do not ever, ever, ever draft a defense unless it's in the 11th or 12th round. And do not ever draft a kicker unless that kicker is in the 13th or 14th round of the draft.
And it's definitely funny how you mentioned don't draft defenses and kickers unless later rounds. And it's funny because I still see so many people taking defenses in the 5th round. Even if it's a great defense, the thing with defenses is when you decide to start your defense, you have to know who they're playing too. So you can get you can have a mediocre defense on your roster, but if they're playing an awful team with a terrible offense, you know
what? Two awful teams playing each other can score you a lot of points if you pick the right defense.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's what makes fantasy football so worthwhile, because now we're watching awful games trying to get the most number of points out of that defense that's going to trump the other defense. So the other thing, too, is, all right, you have your draft. You graded your draft. Your draft is like a C- or a D+. What do you do now? Tread the waiver wire. Walk that waiver wire. Look at it religiously. You know what's going to happen? Two things are going to happen. One, star players are going to get injured, which means the backup players who are on that waiver wire are going to be those individuals that you can go after. Be aware of what your waiver position is, because you can actually plug names in. If you're number 1 or number 2 on the waiver charts, and a lot of people don't understand how the waiver system works, go to that waiver wire and put that player that you want in the queue, so when it comes time and nobody tries to challenge you, now you have that person. Or you can do what I do, not sleep, wait till 3 in the morning, and then go pick up that player right off the waiver wire.
Yeah, that is how you became the mad scientist. I remember it was the first league we did. It was a midnight free agency open. I'm like, how did this guy go quick? I'm like, Greg got him? Are you kidding me? I thought I was the only one up at 12 in the morning. Not saying to stay up that late if you got to work or if you have a class the next day or anything like that. But bottom line, I think drafting sets the foundation for your team. The waiver wire fills in all the gaps.
But you know what? If you have a team that's not great, I actually made 39 changes on my team in the course of one season. There were only 2 players from the original draft that were still on my team.
Wow.
And I won the league that year.
Wow. See, I think that what that shows is that you got to be consistently always trying to better your team. You can't get complacent.
Janet Jackson had a great song, and for anybody that's getting into fantasy football, what have you done for me lately? Remember that. What have you done for me lately? What has that fantasy football player done for you in the last 2 to 3 games? That is what's going to determine the value in picking that person up in the waiver wire.
Oh, I agree 100%. I think the biggest thing we have to remember when it comes to free agents is that you gotta draft mostly, or you need to pick up players that are going to be able to fill up your bye week, because it's very common in drafts to select a lot of players and not even look at the buys. I think Dotson, the value man, doesn't even pay attention at all to the buys.
I don't pay attention to the buys at all. I go after the value players itself. Because remember this, the other person that you're playing is going to have buy players as well. So with all that being stated, you may have a depleted team. Go have a person that you can use as cannon fodder, that you can drop off, somebody that it fills that particular spot so that you can draft a running back, or you can draft somebody that can get you some decent number of points.
Oh, yeah, and I think, too, what I was mostly getting at is that when you pick up free agents, sometimes you're picking up free agents just to fill in for, that one bye week your starter's going to be out, and sometimes you're picking up free agents to help build your team long term. So many times have people complained that they've picked up free agents and they're like, oh my gosh, he's on the same bye week as my other 5 players are. It's these minor details are the things that really make or break a season.
That is so true. So now, As we are approaching the end of our show, I do want to remind everybody that next week is our big discussion about Week 1 coming up. Week 1 starts Thursday, September 8th. So please tune in to hear the fantastic analysis from the value man, James Dotson, and my compadre over here, the Saint DeLaverson.
You guys have a good week, and keep on keeping on, everybody.
And we'll see you at the Cedars.
This program furnished by Sporting Goods, 23 East Washington Street, Newcastle. Call 724-658-2535. Funding for this program provided by Washington Center Physical Therapy, Norm A. Gabriel, MSPT, ATC owner.